Hi, I'm Anne. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a mid-month wrap-up for the books that I've already read in May of 2022. Also, it is super hot outside. I think it's like 84 degrees today, and it's been at least that hot, if not hotter, for the last couple of days. So I'm absolutely wilting. So if I look like a little drowsy or like debilitated by the heat, I'm sorry. It is the reality of summer. I just cannot handle heat. I've already finished 7 books this month. They've been mostly, I can only think of one book that I really didn't like that much, but all of the rest I really enjoyed. I've been having a very good reading month this month. So I started off the beginning of the month with The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. I would not be giving a full review for this book because I think I made an 18-minute detailed review. I will link that down in the description because it was an excellent book, but it also wasn't exactly what I was expecting. It is on the surface a medieval murder mystery, but under the surface it is much more philosophy and theological debate amongst the characters in the Middle Ages. So really fascinating book. I recommend it if you like philosophy and if you like deeper books in general. So the second book I finished, and I haven't talked about it at all, is Prayer for Beginners by Peter Kreeft. This was a reread, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it looks like I read it about 4 years ago. It basically just talks about, in practical terms, how to pray. It is written by a Catholic author. Peter Kreeft is Catholic, but a lot of the information within here would work for any type of Christian religion. Oh, I should have mentioned I gave The Name of the Rose 4 stars, and I also gave this 4 stars. All right, the next book I read is The Scholar and the Serving Maid by Feng Ai. This book was interesting. So it's based on a real-life court case, but Feng Ai, like the introduction says, he clearly took as much information from eyewitness testimony and like descendants of the people involved and court case official documents, things like that. However, let me just say that it's a little bit dramatic. By a little bit dramatic, it's very dramatic. So the plot follows. There is this poor girl who is destined to marry this, is he a butcher? I thought he was probably a butcher. And she falls in love with this scholar that she works at his house for a while. And he ends up teaching her a little bit how to read, how to study like Confucian classics, things like that. This is in the 1800s, mid-1800s, because this is when Empress Cixi was in power. It was also a period in history where Empress Cixi was very much trying to gain power and keep her power because her husband has died and her son, who is technically the emperor, is very, very young. He was a baby, I'm pretty sure, in this book. The whole court case that's involved is this serving maid is accused of murdering her husband with poison. And the scholar is accused of having an affair with her and also poisoning her husband. So they convoluted, they conspired together to murder her husband. And of course, that's not true. It was this other man who really wanted the serving maid for himself. He was the son of the magistrate in the town. So in order to cover up his crime of actually sending the poison to her husband, so he could get him out of the way so he could marry her or like have her for his own. So that's what really happened. But because he's the son of the magistrate decides to just shove the case under the rug and force a false confession out of the serving maid through horrible torture methods, as well as torturing the scholar, though he never admits to being guilty. She falsely admits to being guilty because she just can't handle the pain. And the case is petitioned to a higher court, and that higher court is also corrupt. So the scholar and the serving maid are condemned again and found guilty. And then it goes to the next level and the next level and all these corrupt officials. And finally it goes up to the Empress Cixi, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna send this one guy to investigate, and the guy finally unveils the entire plot, and it's such a convoluted book. It's hilarious. I mean, I talked about this for way too long because this is only like a, what, 200-page book? It's only a 200-page book, and it's just like hilarious to read. I just enjoyed it so much. So I ended up giving it 3 stars because it is so convoluted. And I know it's like based on real history and there are some historical elements in it, but it's also so ridiculous. The next one I read is The Hollow by Agatha Christie, 26th book in the Hercule Poirot series. I didn't think I'd ever read this before, but when I started reading it, I was like, this seems a little bit familiar, and I checked Goodreads, and yes, I had read it in the past. I just bought a copy of this recently, and so I put that on my TBR, not knowing I'd already read it. So basically the plot follows this dinner party that's brought together, including Hercule Poirot, who is staying in the neighborhood at this like a small cottage, and he's invited to this grand house by Lord and Lady Incotel, and one of the guests, this very respected doctor, is murdered. His very timid wife, who isn't the brightest bulb in the bunch, she is found over his body with the possible murder weapon, a gun. So, of course, Hercule Poirot has to solve the mystery, and I really enjoyed this. It has been maybe 2 or 3 years since I read an Agatha Christie book. I don't know why I stopped reading them, because I was working my way through, maybe like 5 years ago, I was working my way through Hercule Poirot mysteries, and I was almost all the way to the end. Curtain, I believe, is the last book of the Hercule Poirot series, and I never read that, but I read almost all the way to the end, and I don't know why I stopped. I think it's because like you read them all together. To me, they feel very similar, so I think I needed a gap. But like coming back to this, I remember just how much I loved this series. It's just such a fun, light series of mysteries. The characters are average, but they're all very likable and interesting. I mean, likable isn't the best word because, you know, some of them are horrible human beings, but they're likable in the sense that you like to learn about them. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. All right, and the next book I finished was one that I've been working on for a couple months now, I think. Lord Peter books. So basically in the, I think, 20s or early 30s, Dorothy L. Sayers came out with a short story collections of Lord Peter mysteries that was called Lord Peter Views the Body, or something like that. And in that one, she had maybe 10 or so short stories. But outside of that, she also published more of his short stories within different detective anthologies that were published later. And then there's a couple in here that weren't published, but she wrote them and they're being published here for the first time. So basically it is a amalgamation of all the different places she published short stories. So it is the entire short story collection of Lord Peter Wimsey. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars. There's definitely some stories that were more like 3 to 4 stars for me, but because some of them that were just so amazing and so hilarious, I had to give it 5 stars just because. There were all the ones from Lord Peter Views a Body had very strange titles, and I will say I wasn't a huge fan of like the titles. Like for example, the entertaining episode of the article in question, or the fantastic horror of The Cat in the Bag, or the undignified melodrama of The Bone of Contention. And I just didn't really like, they're all interesting titles, but I will not remember any of those titles. So I think my favorite ones were Pescatorial Farce of the Stolen Stomachs and The Unsolved Puzzle of the Man with No Face, which were back to back in this one, I'm pretty sure. And both of them were from Lord Peter Views a Body. So I really enjoyed reading this. It's a collection of fun mysteries. Some of these are much more like straight up mysteries. Some of them are much more like light day in the life type thing of Lord Peter, like his story. It does show a story after he's married to Harriet Vane, and for one of the stories has them when he just has his first baby, and the next one has them when they have 2 boys who are like older, in like elementary school type stuff like that. So I loved seeing like where the story went after she's finished writing about Lord Peter and Harriet Vane. So that was fun. Now we get to the two books I actually listened to on audiobook. One I really did not like, and the other I really enjoyed. The first one is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I read People We Meet on Vacation when it first came out, or a little bit after it came out. And that one I think I gave 3 stars. And I think this is more of a problem I have with Emily Henry's writing in general, because I had the same issues I had with that book that I did with this book, Book Lovers. So this book follows this woman who is a literary agent. She helps authors publish their works, and she is going on vacation, one last hurrah before her sister gives birth again to her, I'm thinking 4th child. I'm pretty sure it's her 4th child. And so they go on vacation to a small town, and that small town just happens to be also the home of Nora is her name, her rival in the book industry. He is an editor that she is trying to convince to edit a book Nora wants Charlie to help her edit. So they are rivals. They don't like each other. They got off on a bad foot the first day they met. And so, of course, it's kind of enemies to lovers. I never found that they felt like enemies to enemies. Like they were rivals, I guess, but never enemies. The same issues I had with the People We Meet on Vacation, I had with this one. I hated the romance. I did not feel the chemistry between Nora and Charlie. I did not like any of the scenes where like they had romantic scenes. I just hated it all. It was so horrible. I didn't feel any chemistry. It was horrible. However, like I loved the narrative of her trying to struggle to find her place in life. Nora is having to deal with almost raising her sister. Her mother died years ago, and she's dealing with grief and trying to move on with her life. And Libby, her younger sister, her and Nora's relationship was really interesting to see build and grow throughout the book. So I think here's my problem with Emily Henry's writing is she does everything well, but the romance. So like the friendships, the sisterhood, I just really enjoyed it. The cozy town type feel, the cozy feel in general, I thought was done very well. And then the romance happens. And I think I felt the same way about the People We Meet on Vacation, because in that one, they were friends for years. And I really felt their friendship. I really enjoyed that. But then when it came to their romance, I just did not feel it at all. And I hated it. So I have a feeling that it's just, I don't like how Emily Henry writes romance. So that is more of a me problem, I think, at this point. So I ended up giving Book Lovers 2 out of 5 stars. It just really didn't... it just didn't really work for me. The last book I I finished actually yesterday, and that is Why Didn't They Ask Evans by Agatha Christie. This is the second Agatha Christie book I read, and the reason I read it is just because of the new miniseries that came out on BritBox, which I still need to watch. And I knew the plot. And the reason I know the plot is because there was a series, Marple, that came out on BBC, and they transformed Why Didn't They Ask Evans into a Miss Marple story on the television. So I watched that episode already. However, I will say I really enjoyed the book more than that episode, because what's great about this story is the original book is not connected to any of the big series that Agatha Christie wrote. Whether it's her like massive series like Acute Poirot or Miss Marple, or like her smaller series like Tommy and Tuppence. It's not connected to any series. It's a standalone, and it follows Bobby and Frankie. Bobby is this just regular average guy who ends up stumbling across this body that possibly fell off a cliff, and the guy is barely alive, and the man's last words are, "Why didn't they ask Evans?" And after Bobby endures several attempts on his life of people trying to murder him and Frankie is this lady, Frances, whatever. She's this posh girl. She and he decide to go off on this mystery solving to solve this crime. And what I especially loved about this book is that both Bobby and Frankie, they don't really know what they're doing. They're very amateur detectives, and they're constantly bumbling through situations, making mistakes that I'm like, yeah, Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple in this situation would definitely not do that. And but I really enjoyed like seeing Agatha Christie write very much from the perspective of the amateur trying to figure out a crime without having like a very brilliant mind like you see with Hercule Poirot or with Miss Marple. So I love this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. As for what I'm currently reading, I'm currently reading 2 books. The first one is The Sinner and the Saint. This may look like I'm like halfway done, but the last, I think 100 pages almost are just, the last 50 pages are just like notes. I have about 75 pages left of this. I was hoping to actually finish this today, but I'm pretty sure I'll probably finish it either tonight or tomorrow. I am really enjoying this. I will give my full thoughts at the end of the month, but it's not exactly what I was expecting going into it because there's much more focus on Dostoevsky and his life and the social and political upheavals that were going on in Russia in the early to mid 19th century. And it's less of like the gentleman murderer who inspired a masterpiece. It's less about Lessenar. I have no idea how to pronounce his name, but he was a French murderer who lived in like the 1830s. So I'm really loving this, but it's not exactly what I was expecting, but it's really good. And the other one I am reading is a reread, and that's Jade Dragon Mountain by Elsa Hart. This is set in 18th century China. It is set in this town near the border of China and Tibet, and it follows this Chinese nobleman who was exiled, and he's come back to this city only to discover that the emperor is going to come. There's all this party going on, and he meets Jesuits that are there. And one of the Jesuits is horrifically murdered and poisoned. So he has to solve the mystery. This is a reread, but I do not remember the murderer. So I also realized that I missed a lot of the details when I read it the first time. So I'm really enjoying it, but I'm only like, I think 50 pages in, so I'm not that far. And so those are the 2 books I'm currently reading. And I will say I have been focusing more on historical reads recently, and I don't see that really stopping. I see myself still reading, the random modern romance or the random fantasy. I'm hoping to read Malice or reread Malice by John Gwynne, either near the end of this month or maybe next month, depending on when I get it in from the library. So I have been enjoying focusing more on historical reads recently, and I see myself sticking with that. They always say, if you want to grow on BookTube, you need to have like a brand. And I think my brand is going to be history in general, just because not only am I a history graduate, but just simply because I think it's encompasses all the genres I like the best, because even with cozy mysteries, I prefer historical cozy mysteries to modern cozy mysteries. When it comes to nonfiction, I prefer historical nonfiction over any other type of nonfiction. Same thing with like just drama. I prefer historical fiction, historical drama. I prefer classics over modern books. So I think I'm going to be focusing mostly my channel on history in general and just sharing information. That's just my random thoughts at the end of this video that I didn't really plan on talking about. So, have you read any of these books? Do any of them look interesting to you? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe. I post every Saturday and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!